LeighTDickey.com. Well, hello everybody, Leigh Dickey here. Welcome to another episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast. Now, before we get into the bulk of today's episode, into the content of today's episode that will keep you guys laughing and or entertained and laugh till you cry, I want to get a little housekeeping out of the way. You can find the Beats and Speaks podcast on my official website, LeighTDickey.com, on iTunes, on Spotify, and your podcast player and app of choice. So that means you can take me with you wherever you may go. And you should do that because I am good for what ails you. I am good for you, and I will keep you entertained. I will keep you laughing, and I will keep you in good company and having good times. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into the bulk of today's episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast, where I basically discuss and or tell you that I don't understand the Wizard of Oz, or at least I don't understand the appeal. So here we go. Yes, I know every fan of the Wizard of Oz is probably going to jump down my throat and hate me for this episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast, but I don't understand the Wizard of Oz. I don't understand the appeal. And I mean, I know Wizard of Oz came out in 1939, and is this the first film to ever be produced in color or aired in color? I'm not sure. But, you follow Judy Garland, who ends up in the land of Oz, clicking the three heels. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore. Meets the Wicked Witch. And, hilarity and calamity ensues. You get the Tin Man, the Cowardly Lion. And I never got into the Wizard of Oz. I never could understand it. Never got into it. Never could follow it. Was never like a big fan. My one connection to it, I guess, is that, well, there are a couple connections. I remember having to do a number, like a musical number from The Wizard of Oz in grade school, and like learning the words, not a big deal. Dressing up in costume, I was like, all right, sure. I mean, like, I'm a natural performer. I've performed for most of my life, but I don't have to necessarily like something to perform a number from that show. And, it was cool to perform, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, the theme to the show, I suppose you could say. But, my main connection to this film is that my dad was a huge fan of this movie. I don't know whether he read the book, sorry. I don't know if he had seen the movie as a child. He probably did, considering it was 10 years old by the time he was born, and it's probably something that he grew up with. But I never understood the appeal of, Judy Garland's character basically falling down a rabbit hole and ending up in the land of Oz and basically following it to the end, with the Cowardly Lion, the Tin Man, and the Wicked Witch, and so on, and clicking the heels, and there's no place like home, there's no place like home, there's no place like home. Am I the only one in the free world that doesn't understand it? And, am I the only one that doesn't get it? Am I the only one that's not a fan? I was never enthralled. I could never thrust myself into the wonderful world of Oz, if you will. I know that it's been adapted a million times. It's been redone about a million times. There have been Broadway musicals. There have been off-Broadway shows. In my hometown of Toronto, I must have seen and promoted several adaptations of Oz or The Wizard of Oz, the musical. I could never grasp it. I could never wrap my head around the Wizard of Oz and this like whole fantasy land sort of spiel or sort of mystique of what it is. I suppose for someone of my dad's age now, The Wizard of Oz is a big deal. I don't know whether he was looking at it through rose-tinted glasses and it brought him back to his childhood. Maybe that was it. I don't know. I could never, I still can't wrap my head around the appeal or like in the enjoyment factor of the Wizard of Oz. Maybe that makes me bored and joyless and an old man. I just don't get it. You know, Judy Garland as a child actress in this movie, sure, okay. I can get behind that, and everybody else who played their parts, all right. But I don't understand the mass appeal of this film. I don't understand why it's so popular. I don't understand why it's been adapted and remade about 1 million times over. It's not something where I'm like, I have to go see it. It's something I tried, and don't get me wrong, I tried to enjoy it because I remember my dad renting it when I was maybe, I don't know, 12, 13 years old, and we were watching it because at that time I had a TV in my room that had a VCR. So we were watching it, and I think he had borrowed it from like the public library or something like that. But we were watching it, and I'm trying to get into it, but I just couldn't. I couldn't sort of, like get lost in this film. I couldn't just, follow her down the, in this tornado or the rabbit hole or what have you, whatever it was. I don't even remember much of the film other than the yellow brick road, the cowardly lion, the Tin Man, the clicking of the heels, and the Wicked Witch, and the tornado. There's not much of the film that I remember, and I don't know if I thoroughly enjoyed it, other than like those are the things of the film that I remember: the tornado, the Wicked Witch, the clicking of the heels, those red shoes, Judy Garland herself. Because I mean, from what I remember, she did a masterful job in the movie, and that's where pretty much most of her, or if not all of her, acclaim comes from throughout her career. And I understand that, but I don't understand the mass appeal as to why so many people enjoy this film and why producers and directors and casts have remade this Wizard of Oz film phenomenon type thing. I don't get it. Maybe I'm behind the times. Maybe I'm an old man. Maybe I'm just crotchety, but I don't get the appeal. I don't understand it. Can somebody help me? There is just, I mean, maybe, I like films that other people and most people don't like, and maybe I'm completely missing the point of The Wizard of Oz, and I can appreciate that people love the film. I can appreciate that. Do not get me wrong. I'm not saying that it's a film that should have never been made. I'm just saying that I don't understand the appeal. I know that Judy Garland got major praise for her role as Dorothy, and that's where most of the acclaim comes from in her career. But I could never find it. I don't understand it. It's not something where I would go like, oh my God, The Wizard of Oz is on. Or like if somebody said, hey, I rented The Wizard of Oz, let's watch it, I'd be like, eh. Like I would go off and do something else. Simply because I've never been a big fan of the movie. Right? And like maybe I know that I might catch a lot of flack for saying that I'm not a big fan of the film. But I just don't understand it. I don't understand the mass appeal. I don't understand why it's so popular. It's just, it's been remade about 1 million times over, and there are Broadway shows. There are touring productions of The Wizard of Oz and like other adaptations of The Wizard of Oz. Probably on tour right now as I speak, but I just don't understand the appeal. I don't get it. It's not something that I could get lost in personally. It's not something where I'm like, oh my God, I have to see this. And I wonder if I'm completely missing the point. Somebody out there, has to. There has to. I don't know whether I just need it simplified for me, but I don't understand like where the enjoyment comes in. They're, all the characters are lost in the land of Oz, and the goal is to basically defeat the Wicked Witch, and then Dorothy has to get home to Kansas by clicking her heel 3 times and saying, "There's no place like home, there's no place like home, there's no place like home, there's no place like home." I know I said there's no place like home 4 times. Well, 5 now if you count that one. But I tried to enjoy it. I tried to enjoy it with my dad. I really did. But I couldn't. I couldn't get lost in it. I couldn't grasp it. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I couldn't really enjoy it. I found it, I can't believe I'm about to say this, I found it boring. I got bored. I'm not into films like Wizard of Oz, and it's not like I don't like history, and I mean any sort of history. If it sparks my interest, I'll take an interest in it. But the movie never did spark my interest, and it's not the fault of anybody, not the cast, not the producers, not the movie studio, not anybody involved that's ever remade this film, not anybody involved that's ever like done a touring Broadway production, non-Broadway, like a touring play production of this show. I mean, I know in grade school we did a bit on the Wizard of Oz, and I remember that to this day, and I hold it fondly because I just enjoyed performing the bit. However, when it comes to the subject matter of the Wizard of Oz, I just couldn't get behind the idea of this is like one of the greatest things ever. Like I understand that it was popular and it still remains popular in its day. I was looking up some stuff about the film before I started recording this episode, and apparently it was made on a budget of $2.8 million and made $25.7 million. And this is back in 1939. So what that equates to today, at least in US dollars, I'm not sure. So somebody has to do the conversion, but I'm sure that's a lot of money. Because, back in 1939, money, you could stretch it a lot further. So $2.8 million in 1939 and making 25.7 by the end of your box office run, that's got to be a ton of money these days. But I couldn't understand it. I still can't understand it now. And, the last time I saw any semblance of The Wizard of Oz, I might have been 14. So that was about 16 years ago, because I'm 30 now. And I still can't wrap my head around The Wizard of Oz. I can't say that I'm a fan. I'm really... Like, I've said this several times in this episode and in this recording, I just can't wrap my head around the mass appeal. I can't wrap my head around the popularity. I can understand that people are fans and they are massively huge, like, I don't know, can I call them Oz heads? They just love this film to death. They love the show to death in terms of, like, the plays that they put on and the several Broadway or non-Broadway like play productions that are touring. They love this show, but I was never a fan. I couldn't get, wrap my head around it. I couldn't understand it. I just don't understand it. That's all. I don't understand why it's so popular. I don't understand the mass appeal. And I can understand why somebody of my dad's age would love it. I guess whether he read the book or saw the movie and it, spoke to him in some way, I don't know. Or perhaps anyone else of my dad's age, he would be around 70 these days, and I don't get it myself. As much as I want to understand it, I'm not sure I ever will. But, I mean, that's just my opinion on The Wizard of Oz. Like, I just don't understand the mass appeal. I don't understand the popularity of it. I can't wrap my head around the concept, and I can't wrap my head around the popularity and the mass appeal is basically the main subject line in this episode. I don't get it. I don't understand it. It's just, was it the first film to be produced in color? Was it the vibrant colors in the film? Because it is incredibly colorful. It's a beautifully constructed film, okay? In terms of like the color and what you see, and for a film in 1939. So I don't know, is it the fact that it is produced and or aired in color? Is it pretty much the book and the adaptation? I'm not sure. I can't get my head around it. I can't wrap my head around it. I can't understand the mass appeal and the popularity of The Wizard of Oz. Is it Judy Garland herself, where everybody's like, this is probably one of the greatest films ever made? What is it about this film that makes it so popular? What is it about The Wizard of Oz where people are like, oh my God, that is probably one of the greatest films of all time? Somebody let me know in the comments, and maybe I'll understand it better in that regard. Maybe I'll finally understand it now that I'm 30, now that I'm older and can grasp things like that. And I've said this several times, but I'm sorry that I don't understand the popularity and the mass appeal of The Wizard of Oz. I'm sorry, okay? It's just not something I ever really did enjoy in terms of like watching it. I didn't get it. It wasn't something that spoke to me, if you want to really put it that way. It wasn't something that ever drew me in. Yes, vibrant colors. Like I said, it is a beautifully colored film. Like the colors they use in that film pop off the screen like it's nobody's business. But can someone help me understand the popularity of this film? Why it was popular when it came out, why it's still popular today, why it gets remade about 1 million times over, why it's made into touring play productions. Can someone help me understand this film's popularity and mass appeal? Is it because of the book? Is it because of Judy Garland? Is it because of the colors in the film? Is it because of the cast members and the characters in the film? What is it about The Wizard of Oz that makes it so popular, you know, from its release in 1939 to today here in 2019? What makes this film so popular and so well liked? I don't get it. Okay, so somebody explain that to me, please. But there you have it. My opinion and my lack of understanding of The Wizard of Oz. I am hoping that somebody can point out why this film is so popular and why it's so well liked to me, because maybe now that I'm older, I'll finally understand and I'll be able to enjoy it for what it is. Some people call it a cinematic masterpiece. I call it a movie that I'm not really a fan of, but maybe somebody out there will point out my flaw with The Wizard of Oz, or point out where they think I'm wrong, and please do, because I want to understand this film's popularity. I want to understand why it's so well liked, and maybe now that I'm older, that I'm 30, I'll enjoy it. Maybe I'll go, find a copy of it, and I'll sit down and I'll watch it. But somebody explain the film to me and why it's so popular and why it's so well liked, please. But there you have it. My episode on The Wizard of Oz and the fact that I don't understand its popularity and why it's so well liked. Somebody please point it out to me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But please comment, like, share, and subscribe. This has been another episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast. You can find the Beats and Speaks podcast on my official website, LeighTDickey.com, on iTunes, on Spotify, and your podcast app and player of choice. It is available everywhere. New episodes of the Beats and Speaks podcast go live every Friday at midnight Eastern time. But there you have it. Thanks again for listening. Please comment, like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you all and talk to you all next Friday in a new episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast. Leigh Dickey signing off. Peace. LeighTDickey.com